I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science.
Colleen from Massachusetts.
Colleen from Massachusetts, go ahead.
Oh, good evening. I have been listening to your Bible studies and your roundtables and your lesson sermons for a few months now, and I have learned so much about Christian Science, and I'm so grateful. I started studying Christian Science maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I really wasn't able to grasp it until I found your website, and I didn't know much about the Bible, and I've been learning so much, and I appreciate everyone's dedication and the hard work everyone puts into this church, and I just wanted to give my gratitude for all that you do. I'm so glad to be able to listen to everything and learn so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Pilar from New York, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I want to share my gratitude for a healing I had last week. I got up early to go to work, and I was immediately feeling some symptoms that were a bit distressing to me because indicated some kind of something wrong going on. So when I got to work, I tried to do the work as best as I could, and I ended up calling the practitioner at the Plainfield Church, and she was, to support me in this, and she was very adamant about that there was no infection, imperfection, and that God is all. And after I hung up, I started thinking about what she had said, and I continued working, and after a few hours, all the symptoms were gone, and I rejoiced, and I was so happy and very grateful that this healing came about, and I was able to demonstrate this. Thank you very much for those readings. They were very inspiring, and thank you very much for this church.
Thank you. Tom from Iowa, go ahead.
Thank you. A few years ago, I've been diagnosed with a mental illness, but specifically called schizophrenia. I had difficulty with hearing voices and functioning normally, and but through the practitioner's prayers and calling on the practitioner and getting help from the church, I do no longer hear those voices. They don't come to me anymore, and I'm very grateful for that freedom of mind to be free of that. It's very hard to deal with, but it's not coming anymore, and I stopped taking the medication for it, and so I just wanted to give that testimony tonight. And also, I'm grateful for the website. I have a new phone now, so I can look at the website, and I've been looking at all the material on there, and it's very helpful. And thank you for those readings. Good night.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Recently, I started to read Healing Leaves of Healing by Peter Ross. I'm approximately a third of the way through the book, and it is great. I recommend the book for anybody who has not read it. It really abounds in many healing statements. And thank you for the wonderful organ prelude.
Thank you. Janet from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to Mrs. Eddy for providing the Wednesday evening testimony meetings. The sharing of experiences through prayer and Christian Science is so inspiring. On more than one occasion, I've been helped from testimonies given at these meetings. A few weeks ago, a member of this church testified that she was having difficulty finding an important document. When she turned to God and recognized that in His kingdom no loss could occur, she then located the document. After this service, my husband asked me if I had seen a directory of emails that he was trying to locate. He said they were supposed to be in the file folder in the filing cabinet, but were not. And I told him I had complete trust and confidence that we would find the directory, and I told him of the testimony given at the service that evening. Said that the testifier proved there can be no loss in God's kingdom, and this law of God applied to everyone. In a few minutes, he called to me and said he opened another file drawer, and lying on the top of the files in that drawer was the directory. I'm so grateful for all the testimonies given tonight, which prove the power of God's love for us all. Thank you for the readings and this powerful, inspiring meeting. It's such a joy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm thankful for today's calendar quote from Hymn 99, which reads, "He that hath God his guardian made shall underneath the Almighty's shade fearless and undisturbed abide." This reminds me of Psalm 91, which begins, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." And Psalm 23, which begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." These are three reminders of the assurance of God's protection when we choose to put Him first, obey His direction, and trust wholeheartedly in His complete care. This is something that I'm able to continuously improve upon as I go on day to day, meeting new challenges which cause me to rely on God more. I'm grateful to know now that God is my Father, who provides for and protects me better than anything else ever could. This is the dearest lesson that I've learned in this church. It is invaluable, and I am forever grateful for it and for the consistent peace, courage, and confidence that it gives. I'm so thankful to be here tonight and for all that's going on in this church. Thank you for tonight's readings, for the beautiful music, and for all the testimonies.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
I'm grateful for something that has come to the surface to be healed this week. Last Thursday, I noticed some alarming symptoms in my body. I immediately called a practitioner in the church, and she agreed to pray for me. I told the practitioner I was concerned because my mother had passed away from a very aggressive form of cancer. And because of this, my husband has always held that concern for me as well. I was told that what needed to be healed in part was the mesmeric suggestion I had been holding, that this had happened to my mother, that in reality it was a bad dream that she had woken from, and she was now light years ahead in her understanding. If it wasn't good, it didn't happen in divine mind. Also, that my heritage and her heritage come from God only, that it's not been passed down humanly. As Mrs. Eddy states in Science and Health, in science, man is the offspring of spirit. The beautiful, good, and pure constitute his ancestry. I worked with those ideas, and also that nothing can invade my being, because my being, my life, is in God, always has been, and all good comes from Him. It was a difficult weekend because I was in pain, and it was hard for me to get around or to be comfortable other than sitting or lying down. After it didn't seem to yield, my husband wanted to set up an appointment to have it checked. And I did, and I was told it was a minor problem that could be cleared up and not to be concerned. I'm most grateful for the work of the practitioner who helped me see the lurking error in my thought that needed to be exterminated, that this had happened to my mother and could thus happen to me, the belief of human inheritance. This is something that I will be more vigilant in refuting from now on. Mrs. Eddy also says, if we learn that nothing is real but the right, we shall have no dangerous inheritances and fleshly ills will disappear. Thank you so much for the readings.
Thank you.
Dale.
Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you for those wonderful readings, for the very inspiring testimonies and the music tonight. I'd like to share an experience I had last night that proved to me God's all-presence. Upon retiring, all of a sudden, I was in a lot of pain in my back and stomach. My husband questioned me and wanted to help, but I refused. Then he drew me to him and just held me. Words from Mrs. Eddy's spiritual sense of the Lord's Prayer, found in Science and Health on page 17, came to me. Quote, "And love is reflected in love," unquote. I realized, just as my husband was there to comfort me, our loving Father, Mother, God was there to comfort and heal. That there was nothing going on but God's presence and power for good. That this was a lie, not having any life or truth in it, so I would absolutely not believe it. My thought went out to others who may be suffering from a lie and put the truth of God's allness right there. Declaring that there is no pain in truth, God, there is no truth in pain. And the only chance error seems to have a claim is if we believe a lie. As we learn here, and was given by Mary Baker Eddy, error comes to you for life, and you give it the only life it has. Truth obliterates the lie. Acknowledging man as the reflection of God, it was clear to me that nothing could come between God and my being as his reflection. I really felt God's loving presence, and then realized that all the pain was completely gone, and I had a good night's sleep. I'm very grateful for God's constant care and for all the valuable teaching in this independent Christian Science church.
Thank you. Carol.
I'm very grateful for an incident that happened in our church yard many years ago. It was a very hot day, and there was a group of our members out there going to plant a tree. And they were standing there with their shovels, ready to dig, grumbling, "It's so hot, this is going to be such a hard job." And Mr. Evans, who was also a practitioner in this church and a very fine practitioner, he was standing there and he said, "You know, the hole is already there. You just have to get the dirt out." And it broke the whole thing. Everybody roared, and they just went at the job with much joy and happiness. And I think that so often, if there's something that I'm working on or some project that I have to do, I just think about that God's already done it. I just have to see it completed, get the refuse out of the way, just go forward and listen to him with his guidance, and it'll work out fine. I'm so grateful for that lesson that so many years ago and how it has blessed me so many times. And I thank you so much for those readings tonight, too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those wonderful readings, and thank you for the fantastic testimonies, as always. When I was new to Christian Science, I had an interesting experience that made a very favorable impression on me. I was attending a friend's wedding, which was to be held in a massive tent. Due to a sudden thunderstorm, the ceremony was moved into the house with people squeezed in like sardines. The ceremony was brought to a halt when a young adult attendee fainted and fell to the floor. Some nurses and EMTs in attendance immediately started to help, and 911 was called. Not well versed in such situations, I applied the little I knew to do in science, which was to repeat the Lord's Prayer over and over and over in my mind. Due to the crush of people and minds, I worked my way out of the house onto the porch to avoid the picture and continued with the Lord's Prayer. Shortly, another individual came out on the porch and interrupted my thoughts, telling me all kinds of human theories of what may have happened. It was the minister, and my first thought was, I wish he was a Christian Scientist who heals the sick. Shortly, the ambulance arrived, took away the sleeping patient, and the wedding continued, and I continued with my prayers. Days later, my curiosity got the better of me. I called my friend to find out what had become of the patient. He said that the man had woken up, was checked out at the hospital, and discharged with them finding absolutely nothing wrong with him. At the time, I was grateful that I had something positive to do. Prior to Christian Science, I would have been expecting the worst and been a negative influence. I'm really grateful to remember this episode, now inspired by having read a quote of Mrs. Eddy's in the Blue Book to remember past demonstrations. Made me think that all I had at the time was a faith in Christian Science that I couldn't put into words and not much understanding of how to use it. I realize now with the better understanding I'm receiving daily to not lose the faith and divine love that God teaches through Christ Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy, and this Plainfield Church, which is the heart and soul of Christian Science healing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
I'm very grateful to be a member of the Plainfield Christian Science Church. I've been given so much. We're given so much with all the learning sessions, the Bible studies, and the round tables, and all the opportunities to serve God and work for God in so many different ways, and that the church is so inclusive. And we have members all over the world. And so it's a great, great blessing. The other day, my husband and I went to take a walk in the late afternoon. But just as we were starting up the street, I suddenly felt my foot slip, and I was impelled off the sidewalk and onto the neighbor's grass and sort of slid but into what seemed to be a terrible fall, but somehow I was a little shocked, but I was righted, and it was sort of surprising and amazing. And immediately I said, "Thank God," and I knew that God had secured my step. I felt that, and I was so grateful, and knew as a member of this church how much I've learned about staying with God. And I'm very grateful for my practitioner, who's always available, and for everything that this church offers. And thank you very much for the readings tonight on obedience. That's so important. And I thank God, I thank Jesus and Mrs. Eddy. It's wonderful to be here at these wonderful Wednesday night testimony meetings.
Thank you. Amanda from Missouri, go ahead.
Thank you. Florence, thank you for the readings tonight. They help speak to something in particular that I have been helped with as a result of the teachings in this church and practitioner support, and I would like to express my gratitude for this. And it is learning or starting to understand how to handle the sense of depression and general heaviness or hopelessness that I have often felt for many years, many times for no seeming reason at all. Over the years, these feelings have come at any time, but often especially prevalent upon first waking up, which is a terrible way to start the day. And in the past, before I came to this church, I would often try humanly reasoning with myself to say there was no reason for or benefit to feeling this way, but it would not help. Or I would try to avoid this depressing sense through evasive tactics, such as trying to distract myself with something. But that never worked either. Several years ago, before finding this church, a very kind doctor had even suggested I should try some medication to help with depression or anxiety. And that didn't work either, because I did try that briefly and found myself feeling even worse, and I never returned to them. While this is still something I'm working through, what I can attest to is that with the instruction I have received through this church so far, and practitioner support, this state of heaviness, whatever you want to call anything that would take away peace or joy, is lifting, and it is not as alarming or hopeless as it used to seem. And that is because I'm learning to take a stand and confront it. The testimonies of others in this church who have confronted a similar problem have been very helpful to me, and the honesty of the practitioners and their past experiences have been helpful as well. In my case, while the work remains ongoing for this problem, I have been gaining an increased sense of peace by the understanding I have so far of how to stand and fight this sense of unease and no longer avoid it. Florence read tonight from Mrs. Eddy, "If you wish to be happy, argue with yourself on the side of happiness." And from being here at Plainfield, I am learning to do just that. As we are instructed here upon waking, to instantly turn to our Father, Mother, to listen for His voice. And if I'm feeling that sense of unease, to know right away that is not Him speaking, because He brings comfort and protection and joy. So to confront and fight back against the voice that would seem to argue feeling something to the contrary. The instruction to turn to God instantly may seem obvious now, but I really did not know how to do this before coming to this church, and I was not new to Christian Science when I came. I'm also learning that it is not just a right, but an actual duty to stand up and confront, and for now argue, if I must, for joy and for peace, and for all that God lovingly gives us. The elucidation of Mrs. Eddy's teachings and instruction provided here have been of tremendous help, and I again express my gratitude to this church, to the members, past and present, to the constantly working practitioners, and of course to Mrs. Eddy, who has left us with the tools that truly do meet every human need. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
I want to express my gratitude for Christian Science and for a teacher in this church who helped me to stop being such a wimp. I've learned in this church from this teacher an invaluable lesson that there is a battle between good and evil, and we're in it, we're part of it, and it's essential that we fight on the right side of that battle if we want to have a life. This idea that we have to fight on the right side of this battle was something that was very difficult for me to appreciate when I first came to this church. When our teacher first mentioned that we, have to fight on the right side of this battle, I really didn't like the idea that there had to be a battle in the first place. I came to this church with the horrible misconception that the right way to deal with things in Christian Science was to be diplomatic and to kind of try to work things out peacefully without having to do battle. And as a result of that misconception, I was having some severe problems in relationships with people, in my business. I literally could not deal with confrontational situations. And it was becoming more and more of a problem for me. But with the help of this teacher, I woke up one morning a changed person. And I realized, yes, there is a battle, and I need to be on the right side of this battle. And I realized then how selfish I had been in trying to avoid being on the right side of this battle. Well, when I changed my thinking and accepted, things in my life started to change. I have accepted that there's a battle going on, and as a result, I have become more confident that God is in control of my life. I have found a peace that I didn't have. I have found a sense of dominion over evil that I didn't have before. I've given this testimony before, but it's worth repeating, because if we don't acknowledge that there is a battle that we are part of, and if we don't acknowledge what the real enemy is, we are at risk of fighting on the wrong side, of helping the enemy, which is mortal mind, false beliefs, and we are at risk of working against our own best interest and against the interest of mankind. As Christian scientists, we have a responsibility to be awake to every battle that needs to be fought and to be on the right side of it. I am so grateful for this teaching that I've received in this church. I'm so grateful for Mary Baker Eddy for having fought the battles that she fought and for winning them and then explaining to us how to do the same. Thank you, Florence, for those fine readings tonight on the importance of obedience and rejoicing, because that is how the battles are won, because the battle is the Lord's. So good to be here tonight.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I am so grateful for all the lessons I've learned through Christian Science, especially through the lessons taught here at Plainfield. I am so grateful for every claim and what has led me to overcome them, because from each one I learned a special lesson. But there's a common lesson for all of them, and that is that I must obey the instructions that come from my prayers and not doubt, question, or try to reason them out humanly. I have been very guilty of this for a long time, but now I see others doing the same. That when we pray and we are led to certain articles or are awakened by specific angel messages to a particular book where something out of it pops out at you, we are to obey them. Often, though, we don't, but rather keep looking for something else, or we think there's some magical something that needs to happen to heal what we are dealing with. So the focus shifts from obeying the truth that has come, a particular angel message that we are given, and rather turns our focus on the problem. Therefore, the fears and doubts continue. Mrs. Eddy in the Blue Book gives this, which is so beautiful. She says that his ways, this is from page 93 of the Blue Book, she says, his ways are not made known until he tries our obedience, and then he will reward it. Be of good cheer. It is love unquenchable, love that loves you better than you can love yourself, love that cares for you every moment and will not leave you comfortless, love that says, none shall be able to pluck them out of my hands. So let's remember to obey and work with the truths that we are given or led to, so that we can stand ready for our blessings. I'm so grateful to be here tonight to hear the wonderful testimonies, the music, and just grateful for Mrs. Eddy, all that she went through to give the world what frees us. Happy to be here tonight.
Thank you.